Hey guys, so in a past video, I said I would explain why like what makes a good sword for Bloodthirsty Stone and what would make for a bad sword for Bloodthirsty Stone. So this is going to be a video pretty much just telling you guys how to recognize if a sword is good for Bloodthirsty Stone just based off looking at it. So you don't have to like put it on it to find out. So we're going to start with one example. Let's start with Authentic Triple Katana. This is a terrible sword. Let's get the first thing out of the way. So the way that Bloodthirsty Stone works is that on a hit, it has a 10% chance of proccing and healing you half of the damage. It basically heals you by half of the damage that you did. So this, for example, it deals 2 hits and it has a really long cooldown. That is not very good Bloodthirsty material. Now, yes, if the stone does activate, you're going to get a decent amount of health back, but you got to remember, it's only 2 hits and it's a 10% chance. It's not in your favor. That's not going to activate often enough for it to be useful. And then we have Savage Slicer. Now, you guys are probably thinking that, oh, this thing hits a lot of times. Like, Okaro, that hits 56 times. Like, why would that not be good for Blood? That's actually not good for Bloodthirsty at all. Because here's the thing, right? So let's say that, you know, I do 50 hits, but each hit only does like 200 damage or something. That means if it procs, I only get 100 health back, and it's 10%. So even if it procs a lot, it's gonna proc on hits that do very little damage, and I'm gonna get a really, really little return. So, but look at that. Now, yes, it has a lot of hits, but if it does proc on any of those super low damage hits, I'm not gonna get any health back. Basically, no health back. So this is a terrible sword to have, you know, to have Bloodthirsty on. And let's take another example. Let's say, what do we got? Let's take Mom Blade as another example, like Mom Blade right here. So as you can see here, it only hits twice and it has a long cooldown. That has a low chance of proccing the Bloodthirsty Stone. Now, in a group, your chances will be better. Like if you're using against it like 4 or 6 NPCs, you know, you have 10% chance, you know, on NPCs. You're not going to be activating it too often. And you know, if let's say you do pick a sword for Bloodthirsty in dungeons, when you get to like the boss 1v1 situation, it's not going to activate very often. This is a good example of a weapon that's perfect for Bloodthirsty. This skill right here. So check this out. Each hit deals a few thousand damage and it hits 8 times. So hitting 8 times and it's 10% per hit, that's a pretty decent chance. And if you do get the proc, you're going to be getting half of... And also, the damage does scale with the amount of damage you're dealing. So the more damage you deal, technically, the more health you're getting back. So with debility, he takes, what, 3,126? Let me just do it again just to make sure that's correct. Oh, no. 3,100 and then the way Bloodthirsty works is that it heals you by half of the damage. So if you do half of that, you get 1,608 health back. And if you get lucky, if you proc at least like 2 or 3 of those, and it's going to be much easier to proc because it has a good balance of decent damage and a good amount of hits. So that could actually heal you by quite a bit. So if you know you got a Bloodthirsty on this like right now, and then if we go ahead and put that on a group of NPCs, you know, you could heal probably up to like 20k probably. It really just depends. And then stuff like Aquatic Anchor would actually be a pretty good candidate for a Bloodthirsty Stone as well, because this move, not at all. That move would actually suck for Bloodthirsty, but this is a good one. That kind of made me look like a fool. I don't know why you didn't get caught in that, but it's supposed to carry them. There we go. That deals it doesn't have a huge amount of hits, but if you aim that correctly, you get 5 hits out of that, which gives you an alright chance of proccing your stone. But if you do proc it on this, I mean, look at the damage. You're going to get a lot of health back. So, you know, I would actually put a Bloodthirsty Stone on this just because of this move. So if you do proc it on that, you're going to get a pretty good amount of health back. And, you know, 5 hits is pretty decent because it's 10% chance per hit. So, I mean, I could take my chances with that. You know, five of those and, you know, 10% chance per hit. You know, I could take my chances with that. And then let's take a look at something else. Adventure Knife is another example. I actually have Bloodthirsty on this one. So this one is actually decent with it. because you guys saw that. I'm gonna flash the numbers on the screen real quick, but so that's automatically like 4 hits at the beginning, and each of them carrying like a decent amount of damage. And then this move. Now I'm going to show you, now I actually have an example of a weapon that this is absolutely terrible on. So this right here, this is Longibus, as you guys know. Now, Longibus is probably one of the worst stones to use on this. And I'll show you guys exactly why. This weapon is the best example of a weapon that does not go with Bloodthirsty at all. A weapon like this doesn't go with any stone that scales off of its damage. So even Tempest is not good on this. So Tempest is not good on this. I wouldn't use Poison Stone on this. There's really like almost nothing I would use on this. So check this out. See that? That activates a lot, but on the stuff it's activating on like the things that do like 900 damage, right? But the thing is, half of 900, if let's say like it's 450, right? So let's say out of how many hits? Okay, so let's say out of 25 hits and only procs 3 times, you're only getting 1,350 HP back. That is really, really bad. And then if we do this move here, once again, really low. That one's even worse. So it procced on that, right? So it was doing 461 damage. Half of 461, 230 damage. So let's say it procs on that 230 damage. Let's say like, let's be generous and say like 5 times. Let's say, all right, 530 with the ability. So let's say we do, 530, half of that. That'd be 265 HP that you're getting back from Bloodthirsty. And let's be generous and say it procs 6 times. You're only getting 1,590 HP back. Because you see, yes, Longibus hits a lot of times, but just because it hits a lot of times doesn't mean it's good with Bloodthirsty. The amount of damage you're dealing per hit and the amount of hits you're dishing out is what matters when you use this. Because I could use both of these moves together and it would not make a difference at all. The only place where Longibus would be good is at the last explosion that deals the most damage. Because that last explosion on Longibus, it deals 13,000 damage. And if I procced it on that, I would have got 6,500 health back. But that's only 1 hit. So if you're looking for a good weapon that is good for Bloodthirsty Stone, you have to look at the amount of hits and then also the amount of damage. So if it deals a good amount of damage per hit, that's the first step done. That's good. It does a decent amount of hits, like 5 or 6 hits, and each hit carries a good amount of damage. That's a good candidate for Bloodthirsty Stone. And even Tempest, this applies to a lot of stuff. So watch this. I'm going to show you guys like how bad this is. So I'm going to let him beat up on me a little bit. All right, now check this out. Both of these together. I'll even add Demon V3 on top of that for more damage. Look at that. I literally got no healing. All right, it procced. Let's go ahead and proc it. There we go. Look at that. 1, 2, 3. That's all I got from that. Because here's the thing. You gotta make the proc count. Why make the proc on something that's not even gonna heal you? You have to actually make it count. Look at that. 1. Because a 10% chance is really, really low. You do not want quantity when it comes to it. The quantity of hits does not matter if each hit it does super low damage. Like I'm gonna try again. Look, the results are terrible. Look, I'm healing nothing. I'm literally healing nothing, and the low cooldown doesn't help it either. It just does not work. Look, dude, the healing I'm getting is super, super bad. And look, even on a group, it really doesn't help it that much. So if I were to try it on this group here, it's gonna do better, but not that good. Look, I didn't even get that much back. All I got was like 4 or 5% HP back. That was literally all I got. I got practically nothing. Like right here, look at that. I barely got any health back. I got like, what, a few percent? That was it? Oh. Let's try again. And if it procs on the last explosion... Nope. Look at that. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. But now, let's look over a good example of Bloodthirsty. Phoenix Blade is perfect for Bloodthirsty Stone, and I'm going to explain why. So check this out. So this M1, look at that. 3,626 damage per hit. That is perfect, and it does it multiple times in a row. So if I use it like this, and if I do it on a big group of enemies, you're going to see how crazy the heal is. Look at that. Look at the amount of health I got. That is perfect. And the reason it works so well is because each hit carries a lot of damage and there's a lot of hits. So look at this. Look, 3,000. Look, 2,000. That's literally perfect. And if you look at a full string of this, that hits 14 times and each hit carries a high amount of damage. That is what makes a sword good for Bloodthirsty or even Tempest or Poison. So now I'm gonna let this guy beat up on me right now. But look at that. I healed like a whole 20% HP there if I didn't lose that health there. And you gotta remember, like in places like dungeons, there's gonna be like triple the amount of enemies. There's gonna be way more enemies than this. So you can imagine that the healing will be a lot better. Look at that. This is a prime example of a good weapon for Bloodthirsty Stone. These guys, you're gonna see how much health I get back. Check it out. Look at that. I healed a good amount of HP there. Check it out. Boom, boom, boom. Look at that. The amount of health I'm getting back is really good. And also, I didn't even get into like true divine mode on this thing. That's where like the healing is at its peak. Another like what, 25% right there. But yeah, for Bloodthirsty Stone, you have to get a weapon that strikes a good balance between hitting enemies multiple times, but also strike a balance between each hit carrying a lot of damage. Because the thing is, the RNG is too low, right? You need a weapon that hits enough times to offset the RNG while also still healing you. Because remember, it is based on damage. The more damage you deal per hit, the more health you get back. And that's pretty much how you recognize, what type of weapon is good for Bloodthirsty Stone. It comes down to really just how much it does per hit and how many hits it does. Both factors have to be high.